Hey, Richard Bryce here, Tennis Hacker. In this video, I'm going to explain how you can break through performance plateaus and become a better player, even if you've been stuck where you are for years. This isn't a video for beginner tennis players. This is a video for more experienced players who've gone through that period of rapid improvement and they're now at the point where they're stuck and they're struggling to make meaningful improvements. Now, I'm not talking about learning more information and trying to change your technique. I'm on about meaningful improvements and being able to win more matches at either the same level or win matches against higher level players. So the way that tennis works, and this is something that everyone goes through, when you start playing, there's a period of rapid growth and then things start to plateau out. It's the same thing for kids and adults. And what you tend to find is that once people have gone through this period of rapid growth and improvement, there's very little change after that. Like when I was growing up, the kid that won the under-10s county championships, Richard Lee, was the kid that won the under-18 county championships because he was the most talented player. So we all practice, we all work hard on a game. Because he was a better tennis athlete, he was still the best at under-18s. And you see this on the professional levels as well. You know, players like Sinner and Alcaraz, they weren't just amazing adults, they were amazing at under-12s, under-14s and under-16s. You get very few players who make late breakthroughs. And it's exactly the same if you start playing tennis as an adult. Depending on how good you are as an athlete, this period of rapid growth changes. So for not so good athletes, you might improve for the first couple of years and then start to plateau out. For better athletes, potentially you might continue to improve for 3 or 4 or 5 years and then you'll plateau out. But what you'll find is when players get to that point, it's almost impossible to see people actually improve past that point. I've been living in Vancouver, Canada now for about 13, 14 years. And when I arrived, the players that were playing 3.5s are still playing either 3.5s or below. Because when players get older and they get injured, they start to decline. Same thing for the 4.0s, same thing for the 4.5s. There's never really any change unless someone new starts coming along. Someone is a better quality athlete. They go through the 3.5s, through the 4.0s, through the 4.5s. That's the only time you really see any new people appearing at the different tennis levels. And this is just the reality of the way it is. And when people are in this period here, it's common for them to take lessons, spend loads of time on YouTube, buy coaching programs, and still not improve all that much. So I want to explain why that is and what you need to do if you actually want to make real improvements in terms of your results. So to improve, you need 2 different things. You need high quality practice done consistently, and you need the physical and mental ability to improve and play at a higher level. So in terms of the practice, because a lot of players don't actually practice very well, it's all about identifying whatever the limiting factor is for you at the moment. And this can mean different things. It might mean, okay, you've got a variety of different strokes and you've got a real weakness on your backhand. So you have to identify that your backhand is the weakness and fix your backhand rather than worrying about your forehand. Because when you're playing, you know, a reasonable standard of tennis, if you've got a weak backhand or you've got a forehand that breaks down, any reasonable opponent can just hit it there and they know that they're going to break you down and be able to beat you that way. So you have to address weaknesses. But then if you think about things on a technical level, how do you address that weak backhand? And this is where a lot of players go wrong. They're constantly tweaking and changing things, watching the latest YouTube video and trying all this different stuff out. But what you need to do is identify the limiting factor. What's really going on with your stroke? It's very rarely something to do with a contact point. It's normally stuff that happens before. So maybe there's an issue with your preparation, you're late to prepare, maybe you don't set up in the right position because you can't read where the ball's going and your footwork's not very good. Maybe your timing is off, and this is the case for most players because timing is one of the hardest things in tennis. And because your timing is off, you're never able to hit with power and consistency, in which case you've got to figure out what's going on with your timing, and that brings us back to the physical capabilities, but I'll talk about that in a moment. But once you've identified what it is that you need to work on, you have to practice it at progressive level of difficulties. So you have to find the right level of difficulty. Say I am working on the way that I prepare, you have to do that over and over again. You have to get enough good quality repetitions until that new thing becomes a habit, And then once it's become a habit, then you can integrate that new thing within match play, and then you find the next thing that's holding you back. And it's this constant cycle of improvement. But you have to choose the right thing first, and you have to work on it for long enough, and you have to do enough repetitions until it becomes a habit, and then you move on to the next thing. And again, depending what your issue is, you might need to work on a different thing. For me at the moment, I'm relearning to play left-handed. I'm really focusing on my forehand. So the way that I've been practicing this, I spent the first couple of years really thinking about the spacing and the preparation, because that always comes first. So I had to basically work on my footwork, program in specific footwork patterns and learn how to do that with my left hand. I then had to integrate that in on court, so set up particular drills. So I feed myself a bunch of short forehands and work on those short forehands, and then feed wide forehands and feed high forehands to get lots of repetitions of the different types of ball that I might be dealing with, so that then I can start to habituate my responses to that. So now whatever the ball is, I'm able to prepare, I'm able to set up the right distance from the ball. And that kind of took me a couple of years. And now I'm really working on developing the timing, trying to drive through my back hit more and get better timing and start to be able to hit with more power and still maintaining the consistency. So that's the process that I've been going through in terms of what I'm doing with my left hand. You've got to figure out what it is that's holding you back, and you've got to work through it like that. The next part of it is going to be your physical capability. And this is what holds most players back, because there are players out there that do practice well, they've got good coaches, but they still don't improve, because you can only do what your body is capable of doing. And I like to place things in a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, we've got strength and flexibility, because they are important. If you're trying to get out for a wide forehand or a wide backhand, you need a degree of strength and flexibility to get into those positions. It can be very important. But for most players, that isn't the biggest limiting factor. For most players, it's down here somewhere. The biggest problem I find for a lot of players is the visual side of things. They can't read where the ball's going quickly enough, so they're late to prepare. They've got slow reactions. Because they can't read where the ball's going, they don't set up in the right position, so they either don't move forwards, they don't move back, they're too close to the ball. So the only way to change that is to train your visual system. And there's lots of different ways that we can do this. But using simple exercises, you can improve all of the visual skills, and that really helps players to make breakthroughs. Because if you can't read where the ball's going, if you can't track the ball through to contact, some of the technical things that we've just described, it's not possible to fix them. And then we've got balance and coordination, which are the next layer of the pyramid. Because in order to use different techniques, in order to control the angle of the racket face on different shots, you have to have really good coordination. And the brutal reality is that most players aren't as coordinated as they think they are. To play high-level tennis, those players are unbelievably well coordinated. That's why you can do it. And if your body can't control itself in specific ways, it's going to limit you. So I find that players have to improve these things as well before they're able to really change the tennis level. And again, this is something that you can do with brain-based training. If you would like help with that, that's one of the main things that I help tennis players with. I've got a web class that's going to teach you a lot more about it. So I'll place a link to the web class up there, and I'll place a link to the web class down in the description, so you can check that out if you would like to learn more. But you've got to figure out what's holding you back. Now for me, I already did loads of work on my visual system, loads of work on this when I was back playing right-handed before I mangled my collarbone. So now I don't focus on this as much. I still do it, but my priority is up here, but not on the strength, on the flexibility, because that's my limitation. You've got to figure out what your limitation is. But then we've also got the mental capabilities as well. When you watch most players play, the practice quality isn't very good because they lack focus. Players make way too many mistakes in matches because they lack focus. So I class this as the base of the pyramid. And then above that, we've got decision making, because again, when you watch a lot of players play, some of them are just making errors through lack of focus, but then there's also a lot of terrible decision making. Most players are obsessed with just hitting the ball as hard as they can. They make way too many unforced errors. They blame their opponent for being a pusher and a grinder, when the reality is they've got poor discipline and poor decision making. So that's something that you might need to improve. And then on top of that, we've got emotional control. What's your ability like to handle pressure and to handle stress? Now, for all of these things, we can train them deliberately. So just like you can practice your forehand, you train the skill of your forehand, you can train your mental abilities as well. You actually go out on court and say focus is the thing. You're like, right, I need to become more focused. So my job when I play tennis and practice today is to monitor how many times I lose focus. How many times do I look up around and start thinking about what's going on a court down there? How many times do I think about work or what I'm going to eat for dinner? How many times do I lose focus? And then you kind of grade yourself on it. And if you do it well, you mentally reward yourself, and over time you train yourself to have less lapses in concentration. And we can do the same thing with decision making, the same thing with the emotional control, up to a point, because at a certain point this stuff is to do with how different areas in your brain are functioning. Because if you think about something like ADHD, that happens when specific parts of the brain aren't doing what they should be doing. Now here we're not talking about a disease classification, but there is a spectrum of focus from Novak Djokovic at one end, who's got ridiculous focus, to the player that constantly loses focus down there. There's function changes within parts of the brain that deal with focus and concentration in those players. And again, using brain-based training, we can improve the function in these areas. We can do brain training exercises, and when you combine that with the skills practice, you can really start to make improvements in these areas. And again, it's about working out what you need to do to improve your game and addressing it. But this is the approach that I found that I was able to use to really break through performance plateaus that I had before I learned about brain-based training, and I've now been able to use this same approach to help other players. But if you've been playing tennis for a while, you will know that it's very hard to make meaningful improvements. You've got to start by being honest with yourself. Are you actually improving, or are the results the same? And then you've got to figure out what's going on. And you've got to take the time, you've got to put in the effort to work on whatever it is that you need to work on. Because doing more of the same, watching more YouTube videos, going out there and just hitting balls, it's not suddenly going to give you a different result. You've got to understand that if you want to be a better tennis player, you've got to be a better tennis athlete. And sometimes that means having the discipline to not hit as many balls, and maybe to spend more time in the gym working on your cardio or lifting weights, or if you know how to do brain-based training, training your visual system, training your coordination. But it takes whatever it takes to become better. It's up to you whether you put the work in to do it or not. But this is how you want to think about breaking through performance plateaus. Hopefully this video has been helpful for you. If it has, really appreciate it if you give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel before, I'd appreciate it if you do that. I like to talk about things like this, about how to really make improvements rather than making fluff videos claiming that you can hit your forehand like Federer in 3 simple steps. So if you like that, it's awesome if you could subscribe. And again, just a reminder about that class that's going to teach you about brain-based training. We've got a link up there and down there for you to check it out. Okay, I'll catch you next time.